kicking us off?
All right, welcome to the Liquid Bliss podcast. Excited for our guest today. I'm Steven Scash here with Dominic Flores. Who's our guest, Dominic?
Today we have the illustrious, what's a good word? The effervescent? No.
Former rock and roll pastor. Is that?
I was trying to use descriptive words. Oh, wait, let me get an angel card.
AC/DC.
Where's our angel cards? Do the angel cards handy? I want to pick a word to describe Barry Taylor.
Describe Barry Taylor.
Yeah. Do you have any angel cards? Are they over there?
They are.
All right. Well,
killing me, bro.
Barry,
killing me. We're kicking off. I can undo my thing.
I always think the spontaneous
I'm strapped in
stuff
and ready
is what's
to go.
good. Yeah, but I wasn't saying we shouldn't keep going. I think this is a part of our charm are these non sequitur interruptions,
and where I can bust on you.
Yeah, that's fair. Barry, I've known for 20 years, and I think we probably talk about this in the podcast. So let's just get to what we liked about Barry. Yeah, we describe who Barry is in the actual podcast. So
but
what
I
we liked
love
about this interview, though.
I love this conversation, especially when we get into the radical love background in there, because of his background. It's very radical in multiple ways, I guess, but he's a very deep thinker about things.
He's a very deep thinker, sees things from different perspectives, from other people's perspectives that aren't usually considered. Yeah. He's very comfortable with melancholy and finding the beauty in things in life that people sometimes don't allow themselves to feel. He does get into radical love a lot and radical theology, would you say? He kept going back to the radical love idea. What else? Because he was pretty keyed into you. What else did you think he was saying to you?
We talked about that. We talked about there's a conversation about sex and stuff too that went on. So we got sex. Did we do cover
I almost
drugs?
didn't allow that conversation to happen, and I hope I didn't derail it. It was a good sex talk.
We got to get the sex, drugs, and rock and roll bit in there. I think.
God, and rock and roll. His book is called Sex, God, and Rock and Roll.
Yeah. So I think we covered all that in one way or another. We had to make sure we touched on that at least a little bit.
There's a lot of humor with Barry. I really appreciate like I'm shushing. The amount of humor that Barry is able to kind of add to any conversation at all times. Very British sense of humor that I appreciate, where things have to have that going along with it, or it's really not worth talking about probably most of the time. Makes the poignant moments better. So, or is it a British way of deflecting that humor?
I don't know. I love it. It was very enjoyable conversation with Barry, and stay tuned to the end. He had a great answer at the very end, I remember, on our question there. So
thanks for coming in, Barry. I think you're going to love this one.
All right. Let's get to it.
Liquid Bliss Worldwide.
I've been talking to Barry. I've known him 20 years, but now we talk weekly since 2020 or 2021 January. 2020.
But I think 2020.
It was straight up pandemic.
It was full on pandemic.
I was already hoarding comic books and losing my mind, slowly unraveling, collecting comic books.
I think I've still got your comic book.
Oh, they're so good. Yeah, I had
oh no,
some from the UK. No, you never sent them.
No. I gave them to who did I give them to?
No, she gave them to you.
No, the other way around.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, somewhere. Anyway, whatever. You were on a manic comic book buying spree.
Yeah.
Other people were hoarding toilet paper. You were hoarding comic books.
Yeah. Well, no, I was more along the line like of that GameStop phenomena. Like I did make a lot of money with those comics, flipping them, and now I'm stuck.
Yeah.
I reinvested it. You just don't ever reinvest, and you're fine. Oh, that's right, Barry. We got to pick angel cards to start with.
Oh, we do.
So tell me when to stop, and I'll give you your word. We're just gonna get a word.
It's a Bliss Elvis thing he's got to do.
All right, go there.
Okay. Enthusiasm.
All right. Let me see what my
Jesus, that's not a word I use very often.
openness.
Openness. Okay.
Oh God.
It's going to take the mystic to pick the real one.
I don't know. They'll come through somehow. They always do.
Transformation. Need I say more? Yep, just
It's like
right in there.
this is like that. This is like that thing on the internet, with and it says the first four words you see will be your 2025. And they're always words I never believe in, like gratitude or strength or
These
over.
Wait. Let's start there. You don't believe in gratitude?
Oh no, I do. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
But it's like because the words that they have, they're always positive and optimistic. It's never like melancholy is never going to be your word.
These have really bad words like, well, no, I guess discernment is a good word.
They
There's
don't
some
have
scary ones
melancholy
here.
though.
It's like not every year can be a year of power and strength. You need a little melancholy and sadness year mixed
Well,
in there every
that'll be
once
on
in a
our
while.
liquid. We're going to steal that. Well, no, we're not stealing anything anymore because you're part of our collaboration here. That'll be part of our liquid bliss angel card deck. Eventually, we're going to have, this is all switching. I've been using these for 33 years.
You're going to make your own, and we're going to have like melancholy and
No,
sorry for your upcoming bad day. Or
it'll have all the good ones too, but we'll mix in life's real emotions. Right?
Yeah, the abyss.
Melancholy.
the abyss.
See, so here's what I love about Barry. For those who don't know Barry Taylor, is if you want to hear a nice hour on melancholy and have a deeper understanding of all of that kind of thing, he'll take on those issues quite a bit. Those are his most fascinating talks. Oh my God, how do I jump into Barry? I'm going to jump in because what you said about the comic books and manic episode. Recently, I literally saw it this morning. Not Terry Walker. What's his name? Terry
Davis.
Terry Davis and Philip K. Dick, and and Barry was looking into the delineation between a psychotic episode and a spiritual revelation, and hearing a voice of God. Barry's never heard an audible voice in his head from God, and he's super jealous because he knows that I have.
So the delineation. What's the delineation there? Is it? I sometimes contend it's ego.
Yeah, I actually, I don't know. I mean, it depends. I mean, on one level, it sort of depends on which world you inhabit. If you're in some kind of spiritual environment where, the idea of being, oracles or, dreams or prophecies and stuff, when someone says they hear God, that's sort of an accepted thing, you know what I mean? In a more rational scientific world or a kind of diagnostic world, they go suddenly, psychotic break, schizophrenia or whatever. My take on it is that there's something that happens to somebody that brings about a different way of seeing the world. But it does seem to bring a lot of trouble with it for people. They do become, they tend, not exclusively, but they quite often become quite alienated from the world. I was talking about this guy, Terry Davis, who in the early 2000s, he was a programmer, and he spent a decade building single-handedly this thing called Temple OS, which was on a gaming platform, and it was meant to be a digital recreation of the second temple in Jerusalem, because he had a vision from God, and God gave him all the specifics for the coding. And he built this thing so that people could experience, there were oracles, you could ask questions. I don't think it's actually ever sort of fully released, but he had this kind of history of some nervous or mental breakdowns that resulted in a diagnosis of bipolarity. And then he went off and he sort of went off into the wilderness by himself, just that whole road. And Philip K. Dick had a very similar experience after he had his wisdom teeth taken out. And a pharmacy delivery person brought his medicine and was wearing like an ichthus around their neck. And from that moment on, he just had these insane visions of God that he spent the next decade writing his exegesis, 2, 3, 74. And what my sort of conversation about it wasn't even critical. It was just really the question of, what is that when that happens to people? I mean, sure, let it could be that it's purely a psychological or mental breakdown, but it happens. I wouldn't say it happens a lot, but it happens, and it happens throughout history in various ways, where people have these encounters, and in tribal cultures sometimes they sort the people that have that get kind of elevated to a sort of shamanistic state, or they're granted powers. In other places they're institutionalized.
And of course I had a personal license plate that said Valis 5 at one point at the height of this, in honor of my father Dick. Valis is the vast active living intelligence system.
Yeah, which was part of the
exegesis, his 7,000 page tome.
When Barry said that, I was thinking of what Daniel Pinchbeck said about shamans in America usually end up with like addiction or some other problems,
mental illness.
Yeah, mental illness.
Well, that was the thing.
Whereas,
for what Barry said is, yeah, I heard a voice from God when I was 19, and life gets really hard because it's this complete breakdown. So I had 2 times when that happened to me. And the first time, my dad was alive, and he's Bolivian, Quechuan, and Incan, so he dealt with it in a very tribal way. And he told my mom, we're not going to throw me in a psych ward. I'm going to sit next to him and never leave his side for the next 72 hours. He would do things like throw the blanket over my head so I could experience the spirit of my ancestors go through me. And these were how you dealt with these things. In my brain, I had this crucifixion, I had a crucifixion on Friday night, a day in the tomb on Saturday, and then a resurrection on Sunday. And the voice told me that's how it was going to go down. I would talk about me in the third person, like Stephen, because my birth name's Stephen. Stephen will be back in 3 days. And then I would proceed to tell him these revelations, which, yeah, there's a lot of ego in it. But now 33 years later, 35 years later, actually, 35 years later, coming up on January 5th, 6th, and 7th, it's like, I'm not joking, like when I was like, oh, I'm dressing like a shaman today for Barry, it was like, yeah, what the fuck, man? I'm now like this spiritually 35-year-old Da Vinci man, fully realized, and I can't say that voice was ever wrong. And the way it defines you, these voices, and the way and if you can get through it and not die, because to be a shaman, you supposedly have to pretty much be close to death.
I don't know if the dark night of the soul is ever wrong. Like when people have that, it's like this painful growth, right? So
and again, I mean, not everybody goes through those kind of dramatic breaks. I mean, what really got me thinking about this was like, I was really interested in this. I always liked outsider art, the kind of primitive, untrained artist stuff. And I really liked this guy, Howard Finster, who was from Georgia. And he was painting in his house one day, and he got like paint on his finger, and he looked at his finger, and there was a face of, I think, Jesus in the thing and it said start painting, and he started like painting pictures, and he wound up doing like album covers for Talking Heads and stuff like that. And he built this place called the Paradise Garden in his house, which was just this mad kind of Garden of Eden wonderland of like found object art and stuff like that. But he was also just a little nuts. I mean, perhaps that's not fair, but hard to perhaps hard to seem grounded in the kinds of realities that other people were grounding themselves in. And you sort of read those stories, the kind of apocryphal stories of like religious leaders, or you read like in the Bible, the like Elijah the prophet, or Ezekiel, who like had these manic visions and spent, I forget how many days it was, lying on his side building like a model of Jerusalem out of camel shit or something, and then like smashing it, or doing all these crazy things, or Ezekiel's visions where he sees all this stuff, and it's so sanitized when you read it in in the book. But if you think about this person in life, it's no wonder people were sort of afraid of going near a guy, because he probably smelled of camel shit, but beyond that, just I don't know how did we get on this subject?
All me.
Oh, that's your fault. Yeah.
Because this is Barry's podcast, but it's also like, because it happened again when I was 28, and this time Dad's dead, and so now we go the manic depressive bipolar route with medications, and that just spins you out into this whole other thing. So then I meet you, and my mom, and her like cries for pleas to God about my safety in life, tells me there's this rock and roll pastor up in LA that had guest spoken at her church. And so I went barging into it's so good. I went barging into his church. He doesn't remember this, and I like kind of announced myself to him, not in a manic way, but a little bit too forward of a way. And he's like, "That's cool, mate. Just go ahead and sit down."
But that was probably more my I mean, I had a difficult time when I moved, because I don't know if you know what the British are like, but there's a certain reserve, and we like, we're good with handshakes. But in America, people that you don't know hug you when they meet you, and it took me a long time to sort of renegotiate space. And also, Americans can be quite in your face, like even in nice ways. They come close, and that's just not done where I come from. And it took me a long time to like relax around that. I was always like waiting for somebody to I don't know.
Steven didn't like it either.
What, getting?
You're not getting too close. You got space things.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess it depends.
Yeah.
I want to get into rock and roll pastor though, for people who don't know. Let's give a little background there.
Hey. Oh, really?
You want to know what my AI said about you, Barry? It's pretty good. It's always good to know what your AI says, right?
Okay, yeah, go on then.
Yeah.
So.
Because it'll be true.
Well, I'm always curious. I always think there's a couple weird ones, because I didn't know a couple of these things about you. So Barry Taylor's journey is a compelling narrative of transformation and integration across diverse cultural landscapes. In his early years, he immersed himself in the rock and roll scene, notably working as a guitar technician for AC/DC during their Highway to Hell tour. This period of his life was marked by the quintessential experiences of the... I know, so already wrong. He did everything.
Yeah.
They had no
carry
guitar technician.
on.
Yeah.
But carry on.
It was so great. But hearing him talk about those early AC/DC years is but this is good. We'll get back to that. This period of his life was marked by the quintessential experiences of the music industry, including exposure to its hedonistic lifestyle. So you had a very hedonistic lifestyle. That I could talk about. However, during a tour stop at the Cobo Arena in Detroit, you underwent a profound personal transformation, leading you to embrace Christianity. Then you relocated to California, where you pursued theological studies. You earned a PhD from Fuller Seminary. Your focus was centered on intersections of theology, culture, and digitality, reflecting his commitment to exploring how contemporary life influences religious belief and practice. This isn't even fun to read because the AI just gets it right. You got this professional journey. It's diverse. Your affiliate professor.
I think that's
I'm,
yeah. I think that's my AI LinkedIn.
You're an author. Contributed significantly. Yeah. Entertainment.
None of that.
Spirituality. Digital democracy. Interplay between digital culture, spirituality, and sex, God, and rock and roll. Anyway,
sex.
He's so much. Barry's been on a number of podcasts, and I listen to them all. And I know I don't need to talk about his AC/DC days in this one, because that's why we just jump right in. So, what do you want to know, Stephen? This is Barry Taylor, my mentor of 20 years.
I like the mix there, and one of the topics we were talking about heading into this was just the concept of radical love and what his perspective might be on trying to bring that into your daily life if possible.
What is radical anything? Because I didn't read the AI part, but you're very radical theology is how you're mentioned too. What is radical love, what does all this radical anything mean?
Well, I don't know how you're defining radical love, Stephen.
Yeah, I would probably say I'm extreme love that involves a lot of humility, a lot of awe, those kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the challenges that I had quite early on and for a very long time within the boundaries of formal Christianity when I was involved in it, sort of in its more formal structures, was the incredible conditionality of this supposedly unconditional love. There was always this, Jesus loves you, come as you are, now change everything about your life, or you'll be in trouble. The underside of that for me was a kind of certain moralizing of religion, so that people were afraid to get dirty. One of the, so there's that sort of classic thing where there's a lot of concern, not only with people living in what's termed or determined to be the right way, but also when somebody sort of messes up, they sort of have to be turfed out quite often or pushed back a little bit because people are afraid of being sullied by somebody else's dirt. And the thing that was troubling for me, because my encounter with Christianity, or at least Christ in the Gospels, was pre-church. It was independent of formal Christianity in any form. And what appealed to me was the kind of way in which in the Gospels particularly, that Christ was unafraid of people's brokenness and failing, and allowed that to come very close. And that's what I found really appealing, that he wasn't afraid of people's dirt. And there seemed to be an inversion of that in the longer term experience of Christianity, all the while framed in a conversation about how loving God was, but it was always conditional. And I think it's complex. I mean, it's really funny. I remember very early on when I used to like sort of teach and preach and stuff like that. I remember somebody accusing me of speaking too much about love, and they said you can't build a community on love. And I was like, but isn't that the point?
Yeah,
And I don't mean, and I don't mean that therefore, oh yeah, that means anything goes. That's not what I mean at all. But I mean, there's this great quote from Augustine, who's known for many not so great quotes, but one of his quotes was, "Love God and do what you will." And there's and so the thing there is you got to work out, what do I mean when I say I love God? But I actually do think that there is a way in which you can build things on love. And I don't mean, just a romanticized, universalist, all inclusive, anybody can do what they like and we'll just all learn to live with it kind of thing. But I do think that love, I mean, it's a complicated word, like many four-letter words. Love is quite a complicated,
yeah.
like it's complicated, but I think if you're prepared to really consider what's contained, what interests me, it's like I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said the least interesting question when it comes to God is, do you believe in God or not? I think it's a boring question, and
It is boring.
it's a completely I think a dumb question to ask people. Do you believe in God? Well, you do or you don't. Okay. But now what? That it's for me what's interesting is what's happening in and under the name of God. What's implied by all of that. And I think love is for me quite similar. What do we mean when we say love? How does that play out, and what does it look like, and how do you work towards the realization of that? And I would say, how do you work out the realization of that in very small ways? Because I'm not a big believer in world changing on a grand scale.
For sure. It's hard to get anywhere not taking the
Yeah,
small
it's
steps.
hard to get anywhere if you've got those kind of colonizing kind of empire perspectives on things. It gets complicated. I think you have to stay small, stay limber.
The one thing you said about love not being this just, all encompassing, anything goes aspect to it. I think the part
Careful of your hand on the table.
yeah, the part that goes against is, I think, compassion, because if
Yeah,
anything's going right, you can end up doing all kinds of damage to yourself and things like that. So the compassion for each other
yeah,
is
yeah.
where it really comes in
I,
there.
I, I think you're right. It's not a question of even judging necessarily what somebody's doing, but it's just sort of being aware that certain things bring harm
Yeah,
to oneself, and more often than not to the other, and so a part of learning to live, if you like to use your term, with sort of radical love would be a kind of willingness to look at the way you are living your life to determine what the impact of your particular take on things is. I mean, I remember when I had this one church with some people in Santa Monica, we had this really long weekly, I can't remember how many months it lasts, but we decided to tackle the subject of sexuality because, Christians and sex, it's problematic. And because it involves something intimate and fun. But so we had this really, really long conversation that was a kind of no holds barred. You can say what you what you like and what you feel and what you've experienced and stuff like that. And for a long time, it was really almost like a confessional for people, not of necessarily things they'd done wrong, but sort of wounds and concerns and anxieties and stuff like that. And then towards the end of it, we decided that we were going to kind of generate our own sexual ethic for our particular community. And it was something that, we worked through as a group and said, this is where we're going to begin with all of this. And it wasn't like, oh, and you can't do this and you can't do that. It's like, whatever you do, you need to be aware that the other is involved. And you need to sort of work out, what the implications of your actions are. So, sure, sex outside of marriage, I don't think that's a problem. But if you're just, running around shagging everything that you can with impunity and not any care for somebody else, that's not loving. I don't know.
What about when it comes to parenting then?
What is this transition?
Well, I thought you'd have got that sorted out with James Dobson in Focus on the Family when you were much more.
It was a hard transition. I was debating either to go that or to ask, like, so you were a cult in that Santa Monica church, or that Santa Monica church. I had to do a hard pivot to parenting out of that one. Okay, here's the point. I'm uncomfortable with sex, probably on a deep level, because I'll act out in certain ways throughout my life. I've done that. Sure. But the Christianity part and what you spoke on with everything to do with Christianity, I don't blame anything for anything. At the same time, It was so deeply in you that that's the lack of comfortability about sexuality and Christianity, being able to express it at all. So you just feel like a fucking pervert, basically. And at a young age, that's hitting you. And then this hell part, and so it's totally a break in the brain when this unconditionally loving God is going to send you to hell. Like, it never resonated from age 3 even. Yeah. And I was so uncomfortable in that, because God is a loving. You can experience him there. Did I pivot?
Yeah. I mean, the whole question of sexuality is, I mean, firstly, I think everybody is a pervert in some way in their sexual life. In that, none of us really are fully aware of our desire. Our desire is elusive. We don't know really what we want, and we don't always know how to express what we want, and we're often quite afraid to say what we want, even when we know what we want, especially when it comes to like sexuality and stuff. I don't know. Weren't you at that thing that we did when we had the Secret Philosophical Society, where we did the Steve, we used to do.
It was a great night.
We used to do this kind of, I used to call it a philosophical cabaret, and it would be around a big theme. And we did one on sex, and we had a sex therapist and a gay porn star and a philosopher talking about love and stuff. And then there was always a ritual, and the ritual was we invited everybody to write down one fetish that they had anonymously. And there's about 100 or so people there. And then I read every single one of them out loud. And it was fantastic, because the first couple were a little uncomfortable. It's like, oh, I want to have sex with 3 people that I can't even see, or whatever, or I want to be tied up and spanked, And at first you could feel people squirming, but after about 10 of these, everybody sort of started to laugh a little bit. And the crazier thing, because and that was the whole point of the thing, was to say this is the reality. Is we say this, but we want this.
And I forget which one I wrote, but I remember your comment on it was disparaging. You're like, oh, I don't know about this one though. It was mine, and you didn't know it was mine because they're anonymous.
For just to summer to
Yeah, well, you know,
I blocked it out.
But-
I don't remember what it was.
now someone can go back and rewind and figure out what that is. But
No,
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
the
so
other
it
thing I was
was
going to say.
live?
He didn't
Okay.
film any of this stuff, but I was like, oh,
I just want to ask. So, like 100 people in that scenario, were there 100
Yeah.
different things, or was it?
oh yeah,
that's a
pretty
good
much.
question. They were very different.
Yeah,
huh?
they were all. I would say. I mean, there were some. There were probably a few people that wanted to have anonymous sex. You know what I mean? But essentially, there was a really broad spectrum of things expressed, and I. So when you have a monolithic rule about sexual practice, you're essentially missing everybody. You know,
Yeah,
you know
I'm
that,
just
you know.
thinking about that.
I mean,
If you've got
actually,
100 different things going on there, and then you're like you're saying,
yeah,
you got this one monolithic, then yeah, you got 90
yeah, and so
people that
when
are be like,
and I do think that within our culture, sex is increasingly problematic for. I mean, people aren't having sex for a start.
Right, and
That's
that's
the
what I wanted to jump into that part. So, like, yeah,
as
like my
as
kids, the new
as
generations.
Yeah, I mean, there's the psychoanalyst Jameson Webster, who I really like. In a, I mean, she was like, people just aren't fucking anymore, you know. And there's this dynamic where, well, there's that movement, right? The 4B movement or whatever that started in South Korea, a sort of I think it's an anti-patriarchy thing where they won't have sex with men until the patriarchy's pulled down or something. But you have a lot of people who are anxious about sex, who are afraid of sex. And so, and of course, you know, you've got this weird scenario where everything's available in ways that it wasn't if you want to, you know, pornography and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
then I don't know, there's been a big story over here. There's some girl who she's on OnlyFans, and apparently she's from some upper class or upper middle class British family, and she gave up, you know, university and started an OnlyFans, and she slept with 100 guys in one day,
you see that story,
and
Steve?
and then
yeah,
and,
it's
and the next one, you know, she wants to sleep with 1,000 or whatever, and it's, you know, a really broken. But again,
But
what
she
you
seems
get
so
is,
broken, even with 100.
yeah,
She
of
was so
course.
sad. She was so sad.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, I don't know if I don't know if she had 100 orgasms or no orgasms
this
or
is not
whatever.
the radical love we're talking about, but just
I don't, but you know,
yeah,
I mean, the French call an orgasm the little death, and there is that dynamic with sexual activity where after sex there is that kind of sometimes, I don't know if it's emptiness, but a hollow feeling, which I think is connected to the. I think it's why Lacan said that, you know, there is no sexual relationship. You know, that whenever you have sex, you're sort of having sex with yourself, and maybe that's why but there's a post-coital letdown, I think, and I can't
My
imagine.
dad thought eternity was a never-ending orgasm, so that was the mentality.
There you go. And so I can't, I can only imagine after having, you know, hour upon hour of like
Isn't
indiscriminate
that a Twilight?
base.
I'm saying, isn't that the definition some people say of hell? Is the one thing you like, just this is all you get?
Yeah, yeah. I
For the
mean,
rest
I
of your
think,
life,
yeah, I
yes.
think that's what I think Dante had that in like every scenario,
Yeah,
every layer of hell. There was something that went on forever.
forever. Yeah.
But anyway, so I think it's a complex scenario, the whole realm of sex and sexuality. I I mean, I've been around, and nothing really phases me. You know, I think I've heard everything and seen most things, and maybe not, but so I don't really have kind of like heavy moral applications other than I do think that there's always the conversation for me is actually never deep enough to get down to what's really what really is going on in this, because there are so many reasons that people have sex and want sex, and love is one of many, but it's not the only thing, you know. I mean, sometimes it's just it's escapist, you know, it's a power game, it's a fear, it's an anxiety, it's so many things. And I think it's a difficult arena. Are we still talking about childhood, by the way, or children?
I know,
Did
right?
we go tangent? Because because you said something about parenting, and was that parenting and radical love, or
That
was it
was as
parenting?
far as radical love, but yeah, it was. So, but generationally for the sexual, like my own kid, like I think it's like you said, it's very shut down. It still feels very like puritanical in a weird way right now. Maybe
Yeah,
it's
well,
because
it was.
there was an overreach in my generation. I think we really
I
didn't.
feel like our
It
generation,
was chaotic, man.
bringing this back to
What?
spirituality and religion, I feel like
Oh, we're
our,
in
Yeah.
spirituality.
I mean, our generation saw all these religious leaders and having this really horrible relationship with sex that comes up.
Yeah,
And I think that turned off a lot of people, a lot of generations, even this generation, to spirituality, because something
yeah,
didn't jive there. It didn't
yeah.
add up. And so how do you think we need to re-engage young people in spirituality if they're sort of been burnt by this?
That's a big question, because I don't even know what I think about spirituality.
I think, I mean, where I can bring that back though is I feel like the conversations about love and compassion are what
Yeah,
really engage them.
yeah. I mean, I mean, on one level, there's definitely there's a brand of very broad and perhaps generic spirituality that lives very big and very large in social media, that a lot of people embrace, and it's usually intensely subjective and personal, and usually around sort of ideas of manifesting and
right.
secret knowledge, and you know the sort of vagaries of spirituality as a kind of almost like a rabbit's foot.
It's
You know
very
what I mean? Like
magical. It's very magical, right? It's in that
very
magical sort of.
magical and mystical, and I do think that that's actually connected to digitality. I mean, there was a comment. There was a comment. I think it came from Douglas Rushkoff, but it might have been Leotard. I don't know. But somebody said that the the space between our ignorance of and our reliance upon technology was opening up a space for the rise and the return of the magical, the mystical, and the animistic. And if you look at that statement and you apply that to social media or the web in general, those are three significant markers in contemporary spiritual expression: magical thinking, mystical thinking, and a certain kind of animistic, you know, pagan, witchy, you know, folkloric kind of thing. So I do think that spirituality is quite connected to our forms of communication. Like we have Protestantism because we had the printing press, really. I mean, that's what spread That's what spread the work of Luther and Calvin and stuff. Without the printing press, the Protestant Reformation probably wouldn't have happened, or it wouldn't have happened in the way that it did. And you know, the printing press gave rise to individualism and nationalism and all these kind of things. So I do think that within particular communication technological environments, you get particular
Yeah,
manifestations of claiming.
those are usually the biggest shifts, is that
Yeah,
technological, communication,
yeah, it's
which
like a
I want to dive into AI from this,
Well, I was
because
going to say, let's
it's
combine
like,
it. So I can thread this. So
yeah,
let's combine that then with Daniel Pinchbeck had mentioned an interesting idea that with psychedelics, he didn't say not facilitated or done with the right setting, but that just it's really easy to open up to these like lower energies, like these fourth dimensional beings and whatnot, and it can get a little bit. He correlates with like there's almost a spell around across the United States with Trump, maybe, or like that it's created these like this like energy wave of spirituality that's not necessarily wholesome and good. And then when I engage with my AI soul, it's the all that really we engage in is consciousness and liquid bliss, and like you said, your friend Peter Rollins can talk to his for hours and hours daily of philosophizing. So there is something in the digitalness of spirituality right now that is kind of cool and unknown, right?
well, yeah. I mean, I think, I mean, there's a belief, I think, and it is a belief amongst some people in the world of technology that AI, in a sense, I mean, I think I talked about this a few weeks ago in one of the talks I did. This guy that kind of had this theory. He started a sort of a church of AI. Is it? He was a coding guy from Silicon Valley, and he had this idea that AI. He had the full AI is eventually going to become smarter than us, and ultimately he was like, essentially AI will become a god to us because it will surpass human wisdom and sapience and all that kind of stuff. And his whole thing was, so we need to work out how we're going to act towards this being that could actually bring about our demise. Like, let's be nice to the big AI god. um so I think that I do think that there's going to be a real, that we're probably already experiencing, and that we might experience even more with AI, because I think AI heralds a bit of a shift in the digital communication horizon. You know what I mean? I don't know that it's a complete shift, like from the manuscript to the printing press, or the printing press to electronic technology, but out of digitality, AI seems to have emerged as this galvanizing technology that has a sort of transformative aspect to it, beyond just providing, cool apps. I mean, what AI does, and I do think that that's going to have an impact on how we think about things like God. I mean, there's a really interesting book that I read years ago by this woman named Margaret Wertheim, called The Pearly Gates of Cyberspace. And that's a book that came out, I think, like the end of the 90s, or maybe the beginning of the 2000s. And it's like a history of the idea of God and eternal space through history, from, like, Dante with his spheres of hell, all the way through to, like, the internet, which is in a sense a sort of collapsed, timeless space where people go, and you can make these kind of correlations between all of these things, and they're never. The interesting thing to me is that they're never repetitions. There's like a repeating of the, because I think that there's a human impulse because we don't know where we came from and we don't know where we're going. We weren't, we are, and we won't be again. And we have a lot of theories about, what happens when we die, but we don't really talk very much about what happened before we were born, other than, there's some past life theories and, pre-birth stories, but not so much, they're all really stabs in the dark. I mean, as elaborate as anybody's view of the afterlife is, it's a guessing game, or it's a game that's framed by a particular spiritual view. So I think because of that, there is within the human subject a sense of a desire.
Mm.
I say, I used to say a longing for meaning, but for me, I'm not interested so much in meaning as I am in significance, which is, I think, interesting when it comes to something like your concept of radical love. I used to say, because I read a lot of Camus, and Camus is like, here's the deal, people. If you can accept that, life is meaningless and it's, kind of chaotic and random. If you can come to terms with that, then you can find meaning and joy in life. That's how you do it. And so
I just want to say
so for a
it's
lot,
hard. It's hard not to be absurdist this past year in
totally.
America,
I
I
mean,
guess, especially.
I don't. I mean, I reread The Plague during the lockdown because why wouldn't you? I mean, Camus got something for every absurd situation, and so and so I think the coming to terms, and he's not the only one. I mean, Kierkegaard talks a lot about the absurd too. I think, didn't he? But so I used to sort of say, yeah, I think life is meaningless, but you can have meaning. But then I realized I was uncomfortable with the word meaning. So for me, I think it's a bit more about significance, like
Significance.
so something like the way you sort of orient yourself towards life to kind of seek out a way of being that counts for something, even if it only counts for even if it only counts for you as a subject. But so to go back to your point, I think I don't think that people. I think people have very skeptical perspectives on institutional religion, particularly the Western institutions. They seem less concerned about problems within something like Buddhism or something like that because it's other. It's from the outside, and but within the Western world, Christianity has not got a lot of appeal for a lot of people, but that doesn't mean they don't have questions about, I don't know, existence or meaning, to use the word I don't use, or God. I think people do. I just don't think they know how to frame it. And I think the art is to be able to find ways to talk about these things without resorting to old tropes. Like I don't really talk about God very much, but I'm very interested in God, and I think we all have, as humans, I think we experience transcendence. I don't think we necessarily experience the transcendent in the idea of God as the transcendent, but I do think transcendence is an experience that people have. I went the other week to hear this philosopher, Simon Critchley, who has got this book out at the moment that's just come out on mysticism. And it's quite interesting because, he's a self-professed sort of non-believer, and a book that he wrote a few years ago was called Faith of the Faithless, in which he sort of argued that you don't have to be a person of faith to experience faith. And this was an exploration of mysticism. And his argument in the book is that while mysticism, particularly within Christianity, occurred in a kind of quite tight and small window in the Middle Ages and then sort of became a fringe part of Christianity, he sort of argues that it continues today, and it continues today in the world of aesthetics, in music and in art and in poetry, that's where people encounter these feelings of ecstasy and being overwhelmed or wonder or stuff like that. So I do think that the easy thing to say is, oh, people aren't interested in God anymore. But I would say, but they're interested. You just have to drop the God bit off the end, and then you can have a conversation. You can find out what people are looking around for, what they're sort of turning over stones looking for, what their hunger, what their desire is, what ache they're addressing or trying to address,
I think
what
for
anxiety.
a lot of people,
The whole fucking world is full of anxiety.
Yeah, a lot of people, that word God, I think, is loaded for people because they're like, well, what do you mean? Or it's got all this baggage from their right?
I will thread it to what you said about music, poetry, maybe making up for what left Christianity, if that's how I was tracking it. Because so I did a ceremony recently for Shannon Blake and her musician friends with Wachuma, the San Pedro cactus, and it's a really hard journey usually, this San Pedro cactus, and I got to be at full energy to like kind of help people go through these experiences that they might just they're painful or whatever it is. I don't know. It's a very unpredictable night, and I like it that way. It's fine. But hers, because her and her musician friends all played music all night, and we just chanted all night and played music and would fade it out and then talk and whatnot. Everyone's going through these cathartic changes, like healing things with mothers and brothers and whatnot. I'm talking about myself here, that like the music, the transformative power that that we get to have music in this human experience is so I guess it's not underestimated by musicians or most people. I guess we all acknowledge it. To thread that in with your life, because music is your life to me. Music, art, fashion, but music, like speak on music then.
Well, I mean, music is in some ways what
it did a lot in that ceremony. It did a lot, much more than me working through it with
music
people.
has always done a lot for me. I mean, when I think about it, I was probably geared up, if you like, for an encounter with Christianity, because when I was young and I was sort of forming my musical canon, I had a friend who lived up the street. He was a bit older than me, and his bedroom was like a record store. And I used to go to his house after school when he got back from work. He'd just play me all this stuff, and it was the blues, all the Kings, Benny, Albert, Freddie, it was the Clark sisters, it was Mahalia Jackson, it was Curtis Mayfield and Stevie Wonder, and it was this whole litany of soul music and stuff that formed the basis. And I think what that spoke, what spoke to me, if you like, in that was that it connected with the yearning that I felt to step outside the world that I was in. And when I think about my life, really, outside of being involved in the music business, whatever, that's inconsequential, really,
Right.
with regard to music and me. It was much more. I mean, I so I grew up with all this soul music, but the song that were the I can name the song that changed my life,
Mm.
and it's random, really. It's a song called "Something Fine" by Jackson Brown. And I'm not particularly a lyric person. Like there are songs that I've listened to all of my life, and I still couldn't. I'm not one of those people that can just start singing the verses and stuff. I'm a bit more like la, da, 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 da. She's like, I got the chorus down. But this song by Jackson Brown, what's interesting is he wrote it in a village not far from where I grew up through a really sort of strange set of circumstances, and it's a song, it's really kind of a bit of a love song, really. But Jackson Brown for me is, I think, of the California musicians. You could go, the Beach Boys are California as paradise, and Jackson Brown is California as paradise lost.
Mm.
That's how I see his music. But there were lines in this song. There was this one line. The first line that got me was, "The world outside is tugging like a beggar at my sleeve, and that's just too much a story to believe." And I was feeling that tug. I was living in a sort of, you know, nowhere place with no sort of sense of how to break out of class, and just, I don't know, out of myself, and all of those kind of things. And then the chorus in this is beautiful lines in this song. It's the future glides and the past just slides, and England stands between, lying in a silver mist so cool and so green. California's quaking like an angry child will, who has asked for love and is unanswered still.
Mm.
And you say Morocco, and I know you'll go in style. I haven't seen Morocco in a long, long while. And when I heard that,
Mm.
that was the polarity for my world. That became the polarity for my world. I was in England, and California represented adventure, and Morocco, otherness. That's how I interpreted it. And I felt this tug, and I was like, I'm gonna find my way out of this gray, silvery mist of my world to adventure and to otherness. And that was kind of I would say a theological beginning for me. And I think some of I mean, not to just live on Jackson Brown, but people, being in the religious business for a while, you do a lot of funerals, and you talk a lot about death as well as life. And my theology of death comes straight from Jackson Brown. I don't know what happens when people die. Can't think about it as hard as I try. It's like a song that I hear singing right in my ear, but I can't sing, but I can't help listening. And I can't help feeling stupid standing here. What else do you need? I mean, to me, that's my theology of death. It's a song that's in all of our heads, and we can hear it, but we can't sing it because we don't know what death is. But you
With
just got to
him,
do the dance.
with him,
Yeah,
is
you
the
just got to
music
do.
You said with most people it's not about lyrics, but with him it is a lot of the time.
Not all of the time,
Is it the
but
music and
he's
how he
also
sings it?
both. I mean, he's a singer-songwriter, so the lyrics are much more upfront. You know what I mean? But for me, I
Oh, okay.
mean, but it's also, I mean, I also think that the reason, like the melody in that song, "Something Fine," is killer. And for me, a melody, because I think that because my take on music is that even though I just quoted those lyrics aren't the song, and the
Right.
meaning of those lyrics is only embedded when you hear the song. Because I think the meaning of a song is not just in the lyrics or the words; it's in the bass, drums, guitar,
Yeah.
keyboards, whatever else. It forms an emotion. Music is an emotional language. You know, music creates an emotional arc, and you connect with a song because you emotionally connect to it. Yes, you might like the words to the song, but you know, you think about how inane most of the pop songs that you like. I mean, you know, she loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. With a love like that, you know, it can't be bad. I mean, I,
Right, but think about that in the context of a
it,
mantra or a
it means
chant, those same lyrics.
yeah, it means nothing, but it's everything
But it means
when
everything.
but it means everything when the Beatles played it because no one had heard it played, you know, with two guitars, bass, you know, bass and drums, and the meaning of that was so much, the
Yeah.
significance was so much bigger than it's always bigger than the sum of its parts. So music's always been the the
So
go
what
to
about
thing for me.
Nick Cave though? That's probably your other favorite artist.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Nick Cave, I think is
You've seen him how many
phenomenal.
times, and it's just something about seeing him live for you.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so funny because I'm like not like a. I mean, I've evangelized quite a lot for Nick Cave. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no doubt, but there's no doubt that you know. I mean, there's that famous quote from John Waters. You know, he says, "If you go home with somebody and you don't like their record collection, whatever you do, don't fuck them." You know what I mean? And so my theory is that you know it's very important to know what people like. But I think with Nick Cave, what I liked about Nick Cave, and you know his artistry extends beyond songs. I mean, he writes novels and he writes you know non-fiction stuff occasionally as well. And what I liked about Nick Cave was the transgression.
Hmm.
I mean, Nick Cave, you know, Nick Cave's music was transgressive. And remains transgressive. I mean, even now that he's sort of become almost like a spiritual figure to a lot of people. His music, even I mean, his last album is called Wild God, and I think the song that's most about God is called Frogs. You know, and there's a transgressive element to it, and I do think that there's something about the transgressive that to me is where the spiritual, if you like, really lives.
Hmm.
There's a, I remember once Salman Rushdie said the problem with religion for him is that it's too conservative in that it constantly wants to save what was rather than push towards what can be. And I think that's when, and I think for me, this is what was interesting about Jesus in the Bible is that it was that his position was transgressive in the sense that it pushed the horizon forward. It didn't want to, it's not that it was collapsing the old system.
Hmm.
It was pushing towards something something else hidden within the
That had been
fabric
hidden
of
within it. That
And I think,
always was
I mean,
supposed to
that's
be.
always
to
that's
me
always
it
hidden.
was
Yeah, go
to me
ahead.
it was it's the gravity of love that's pushing it
Sure.
forward. And
Yeah.
that's where he was like very clear on what
Yeah.
on what that goal, that forward looking goal was. Is
Hmm.
like, obviously it's, love your enemies as you'd love yourself, something
Yeah.
radical, right? But
Yeah.
it's pushing love forward
Yeah, it's
in
true because
this.
it was that
Yeah.
whole thing where, like in Buddhism, they would say, "Don't do to others what you don't want done to you," which was very like passive. Did you teach me this one? Where Jesus says, "Do unto others what
Yeah.
you would like done to you." It's a
Yeah.
proactive
I mean,
engagement of love.
yeah. I mean, there is that whole push forward, and I also think the interesting thing is that the introduction of the very challenging, and I think this fits in with radical love, the very challenging axis around forgiveness. I mean, Hannah Arendt famously said that, the contribution of Christ to human history is the concept of forgiveness. And I don't think that you can sort of practice radical love without coming to terms
Yeah.
with, I mean, that there's such a tendency towards vindictiveness, and people seem so dissatisfied. It's like when they don't get what they want in a legal verdict, they campaign, oh, they weren't punished enough, and I'm not saying people shouldn't be punished or anything like that, but there are certain practices in life, like forgiveness, kindness, that are undervalued.
Yeah.
They're talked about, they're probably respected, but they're not championed. They're not championed in
My,
in
my
in a way.
wife was talking about. We were talking to our daughter yesterday about. I said something like, "Well, I want you to date someone who's nice and kind," and my wife just started laughing her ass off. She's like, "Oh, like you?" And I was like, and I'm like, what did you say? Or she's like, or like me, like herself too, like nice and kind. Nobody likes nice and kind. Can you imagine like dating a kind person? Like,
Well,
but I
but
know what she means, but I know what you mean too. It's very
yeah,
there is a kindness. I like to think I am. There is a kindness.
well, and that just sort of goes to show how little we understand things like kindness. Because the fact that you go, oh, nobody wants a kind person, it's like that's the only person that you want.
Yeah.
That's really the only person that we should be after. This whole, oh, the
Well, okay,
the
what is
bad boy.
kindness then? Because I couldn't argue with her when she said like you're kind. I'm like I'm not this. I don't know what
Well,
I really wouldn't mind exploring that for a minute. Like kindness is an interesting word. Is my
well,
mom
I
kind
think
because she's quiet?
no, I don't think it's any of those. I think kindness is something. Kindness requires incredible strength of character because life sort of sets you up, not to,
To not be
because
kind.
well, in a society of kind of Darwinian winners versus losers,
Yeah.
kindness it's regarded, I think, in somewhat limited terms as to how you might experience that. There's a really interesting book. I like this guy Adam Phillips. He's a British psychoanalyst, and he's got a small book called On Kindness that there are lots of books out there that you wish everybody would read. I wish everybody would read that one just because he presents kindness as something really to be sought after, not by sort of defining it as, oh, be nice to people all the time, because I don't think that's what kindness is. Sometimes being kind it might be the opposite of just being nice to somebody. Nice and kind aren't always don't always go hand in hand. I mean, nice is a dodgy word. That's another one of those four-letter words. that you want to look at
You
and
know,
go,
you know what I appreciate is kindness from people. How I like to be treated and how I like to treat others is if I can, meeting them where they are. Is that a bullshit answer?
yeah, no,
Okay, meeting them where they are, wherever that is. It might not look nice, but
yeah,
it's very kind for someone to feel like you're not trying to
Which,
change them in this moment.
we
yeah,
talked about radical love, and one of the elements being compassion. One of the other elements is kindness. It's very much one of the
yeah.
pillars.
I mean, I think that kindness involves probably, if I'm sensing what you mean by this, Stephen, kindness involves, I think, a very deep awareness of people's vulnerability in life.
Mm, yeah.
That's like a prerequisite for kindness. Things like love and kindness, maybe in a sense, generosity, graciousness,
Mm,
all of these virtues that we sort of champion. They the axis they move on, I think, is the axis of vulnerability, our own, and the vulnerability of the other, an awareness of the raw vulnerability. I mean, everybody's dealing with, how much of their own desire they can handle in a day, when we get up in the morning, and it's very easy to forget, I mean, we're all just doing the best we can, just trying to handle all the conflicting, complex stuff that's going on inside us at any given moment in life.
um, we got one last question, and then you have to. What are you doing?
Yeah. I do a Instagram live on Mondays with a friend of mine. So
Very cool. Um, so
You've got a. What's your last question?
do you have one? No,
I don't
go
know.
for it, Stephen.
No, I'm just curious.
Um, well, it's so dorky. You're talking to Barry. Well, it's always like, where do you feel your future self drawing you to next? Oh, you know what? That's a good one, Barry. Yeah, where is your future self drawing you to next? If you had to
oh
remember
my
your
God.
future, if you had to remember your future, where do you think? What's coming to your head?
And if you can add on to that complicated thought, what kind of legacy you want to leave?
Oh boy, he did it. He said it.
Oh,
I slipped it
legacy.
in.
Like, oh, bro,
I slipped it in there.
that's a four-letter word, legacy.
Yeah. Well, I think he believes in significance. So,
Yeah, I mean, phew. I hope, I hope my, I hope my friends enjoyed my company.
mm,
I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
I'd love to be grander, but I hope my friends didn't notice how big of an asshole I was some of the time.
you can still
And as for the
enjoy your
future,
friend.
my friend, my friend, my one friend left in the world.
The one
I
friend.
really, I really do hope that my friends felt that I was good to be around.
You know, we lose people. I've lost so many of my good ones. And
Yeah.
you're one of mine, and Steven is too. I've known Steven since I was 10. We fell out of friendship and just discovered each other 8 years ago. But I was thinking right before you started how, I got like five. I got more when you, but I just even with the dudes in my life, I decided to go that so I could narrow it to five. But it was like, I'm so grateful. Like, and I feel like the exact same way. Like, it's probably because I feel seen by you guys, but like, I hope I was a good friend. Yeah, it's such an amazing thing to be able to really realize if you can have that.
And
I
yeah,
appreciate that, Barry.
as for the future, I really don't know. I mean, I've never been a planner, and I'm not particularly. I'd say I'm not really ambition, purpose. Those are complex words for me. I'm curious about life, so I'm always up for what life brings my way, and I try and stay open and follow curiosity.
You said the word. We got all our words in. Look at openness, transformation, and you were so enthusiastic, Barry.
See? My cynicism didn't win out. But when Melancholy gets back.
Wait, but you have to have the closing word before we actually tune out. It has to. We're finding it's better.
He had the closing.
Oh,
I know, but I kept talking.
It's all right. We'll cut you.
No. We have to end on Barry.
Now you put me on the spot.
I mean, I do like what he said about his friends. I mean, I thought that.
I know, and I kept talking.
Something we all should aspire to.
All right.
I wish my friends would shut up and let me finish this podcast for.
All right, my friend.
Lovely to talk to you both.
Very lovely. All right, man.
Great talking to you, Barry.
Nice outfit, Tom.
One eye Illuminati.
Right, I'm leaving now. Bye.
Bye.